Guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Raid Shadow Legends. First off, apologies, a little bit under the weather here, so my voice might not be up to par with where it normally is. In today's video, we actually did a video kind of similar to this a week or two ago here on the channel. A lot of you guys really liked it. A lot of you requested me to do it again with rares and with legendary champions. So today we're going to make that happen with the Legos first. I took a look at a bunch of other YouTubers' tier lists for champions, and again, I'll give the same disclaimer that I gave in that video, guys. I love tier lists. This is not a shot at any other YouTubers. In fact, I'm not even going to mention anybody's names here because the truth is I'll share champions that I love, and you guys and other YouTubers and content creators and players, anybody is going to disagree. However, man, legendaries, dude. I looked at 3 tier lists when compiling my list, and I chose only from the bottom 25 champions. There's over 100 legendaries in this game. I chose only from the bottom 25 champions on these lists to pick out 10 or 8 to 10 champions, I forgot, I have them written down somewhere, that I really absolutely love, that are on this list in the very, very bottom of the barrel in other legendary tier lists. So we're going to be focusing on legendaries that I have built out. Most of these champions, I think all except for maybe 1 or 2, that I have built out and I used in Faction Wars, I use in some dungeons, I use sometimes in the arena in today's video. I want to hear from you guys too. Do you agree with me on any of these legendary champions? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments below which of these champions that you just totally disagree with me with. They are trash no matter what I say. Look forward to hearing you guys correct me in the comments. Let's go ahead and jump into the list. So I'm going to go with the most obvious champion first, guys, because if you saw my last 5 legendaries that I maxed video last month, you guys will know that Ricktop the Bold is insane now after his big buff, and a lot of people are not talking about him after he received that buff, dude. This guy puts out an insane amount of damage, man, just like absolutely insanity. An AoE on his A1, decrease each target's max HP by 30% of the damage inflicted. I believe that was like 10% or 15% before the buff as well, so they also buffed his A1. On his A2, attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit places a strong version of poison on all enemies for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown on bloodletting. That's an AoE, 3 poisons on every single enemy, dude. He is a poison machine. One of the best poisoners in the game now, dude. He puts out an insane amount of damage because of these poisons on all enemies for 2 turns. On a 3-turn cooldown, guys. I mean, I'm telling you, this was previously, by the way, before the buff, it was only 1 enemy, man. Now it's each hit 3 poisons on everybody, man. He just puts out just so much damage. And on Curse Hold is A3 on a 4-turn cooldown, attacks 1 enemy. Critical damage increases by 20% for each poison debuff on the target, stacks up to 100%. So Curse Hold, when he gets to a boss, he's going to be laying down all these poisons, and then boom, comes in with a hard-hitting double damage A3 as well, if you can get all those poisons to stack up on the boss, dude. Ricktop the Bold is a guy that is worth investing in, certainly now, if you just want a dungeon. You can't even call him a nuker, but you can, right? Because he's putting out that much damage with all of those poisons. So next up is Girp Tuck Mossbeard, guys, another guy who received a very big buff in the last kind of rebalancing. By the way, I think we need another champion rebalancing before Doom Tower. Are you guys with me? Or are you not with me? I would really like to see some, some really crappy epics, especially addressed in this balance change. They covered a lot of legendaries, but a few glaring misses in the legendaries. But epics. I think that we need an epic rebalancing before Doom Tower. Anyway, Girp Tuck Mossbeard was also rebalanced, as I mentioned, on his Druidic Boon. And by the way, Girp Tuck is now used kind of creeping into the meta on Platinum Tier Arena and in Gold 4 a little bit as well, after he got buffed. And he's also on some of the fastest dungeon teams possible inside the game. I want to give a shout out to Murder Inc. He had a Platinum Tier Arena with Girp Tuck Mossbeard featuring him, and then Scratch AK-47 put out a video on I believe it was him, on the fastest possible dungeon teams, and Girp Tuck made an appearance there as well. So on his A2, removes all debuffs except poison from an ally, and then heals them by 30% of their max HP, and then puts a shield on them, right? So it's nice to have that cleanse on a 2-turn cooldown on Druidic Boon. And then Cloud of Spores, I mean, it used to be 3 strong versions of poison on all allies for 3 turns, and man, that did a lot of damage to your allies. Now it's weak versions of poison, so it's a little bit easier to kind of mitigate that damage as you go, especially with that 2-turn heal and shield in his kit. But for Arena, placing a block buffs debuff on all enemies for 3 turns, or 2 turns, excuse me, on a 3-turn cooldown. So again, block buffs on all enemies for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown is very, very helpful. It's a great ability to have, because right now in the arena meta, we're seeing it move a little bit of away from just having these speed nuking teams, and now we're seeing these Siphies, these Valkyries a lot more often, Duchesses a lot more often, and totally negating them by placing that block buffs on all enemies is really useful on Cloud as Spores, especially now that it's more manageable with those weak versions of poison, okay? And then this one, you know, basically for every poison, we do 7.5% more damage. That's nice for dungeons. And then for arena, we can get 45 for every 3 poisons. So for every Cloud of Spores that he launches, you're going to get 40 plus 45 resist as well on all your allies, helping them, you know, he can play a part on a defensive kind of resist team as well, because you can really stack up that resist by 45, as I mentioned, or by 90 if you can get 6 weak versions of poison on your team off of this passive. That's Girp Tuck Mossbeard. Alright guys, so this is probably, I don't know, maybe the most controversial, you know, champion on today's list. Whirlwind Frost King. A lot of people think he absolutely just sucks, and he is on the bottom of a lot of tier lists. However, I'm inclined to disagree. I leaned on this guy really heavily on Faction Wars 21, and I gotta say, I'm actually a fan of this champion for progression, for dungeons. He brings a unique kind of kit to the table that you can't get out of any other champion inside the entire game. I'm not thrilled that he is a Void champion, to be fair, because it does water down the Void pool, kind of like Visix Unbowed as well. But either way, on the A1, he has a chance of placing a freeze. That's a 50-50 shot at placing a freeze on the A1, and then if he does land it, he places a perfect Veil buff on the ally with the lowest HP. That's came in handy for me a few times, that perfect Veil on the ally with the lowest HP, and a 50-50 freeze on the A1 isn't bad to have. Especially when you get, you know, to tough dungeons or tough progression areas, you can really strategically pick who you're trying to land that freeze on. On Frostbite Blast, his A2 is a 3-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance at placing decreased crit damage when booked for 2 turns, and again on a 3-turn cooldown, and then places increased crit damage on all allies for 2 turns. So not a lot of champions out there. Mashaled is one that has increased crit damage. You get it here on Whirlwind Frost King on his A2. And then on his Icegrave armor on a 4-turn cooldown, this really needs to be, this guy, it's necessary, you know, to book him up. Books definitely, especially for this Icegrave armor, has a 25% strengthen buff that will mitigate 25% of incoming damage onto your champions. Really strong. And then the increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns as well on a 4-turn cooldown. Now, if this is on a 3-turn cooldown, it would be beast mode god tier. It's on a 4-turn when booked, but still, it's a great ability to have. Having that strengthen with the increased defense, again, a very unique champion to have on your squad, and I think a lot of you guys will benefit from him in progression. Plus, a lot of people were able to get him through Battle Pass compared to a lot of the other champions that we have on today's list. I don't think he sucks. So the next guy we're going to talk about, guys, is Brackus the Shifter, introduced to the game in 2019 Halloween. This guy is, I can't believe that people ranked him at the very bottom of their tier list. I was down on Brackus for a while too, so I guess maybe I can believe it, right? But he is actually on one of my tag team arena teams. Furthermore, he's great for Fire Knight, so he's a really solid champion with a very strong passive. So let's talk about him real quick. Innocent Blood is A1, heals him by 15% of the damage inflicted. It hits pretty hard as well. He has a 6-time hitter on Full Moon Rampage, and it actually has a decent multiplier on it. It can be booked down all the way to 3 turns as well. So it attacks one enemy 6 times. The first hit has a 75% chance, can be booked up again, placing a strong version of Weaken for 3 turns, again, on a 3-turn cooldown, so getting that Weaken up there all the time. Heals his champion by 25% of the damage inflicted. Heals his champion by 50% of the damage inflicted instead if they're under Fear or True Fear on Full Moon Rampage. On the A3, Hunter's Howl, this is really hard-hitting ability on a 4-turn cooldown, has an increased attack buff on all allies for 3 turns, and then attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a True Fear, 75% chance when booked for 1 turn, has a 75% chance of placing a Fear debuff on 2 random enemies for 1 turn if the True Fear debuff is placed. So really nice to have that kind of built-in crowd control on his Hunter's Howl as A3, provided you want to build him up with enough accuracy to do so. But, you know, not only is it doing damage, But again, the crowd control with the fear and the true fear. And then on top of that, the AoE increase attack is really nice to have. And then on top of that, the weaken, is really nice to have as well. A very consistent weaken, as we talked about, basically applied every 3 turns, for 3 turns, every 3 turns. What more could you want? And then beast mode is incredibly effective as well, and this is what makes him arena viable in platinum tier. Damage increases by 40% when this champion's HP drops below 40%, and then the active effect is revives this champion with 20% HP when killed and immediately grants an extra turn. So if you kill him, he's immediately going to come at you with, if you have it off cooldown, his full moon rampage or his hunter's howl, dealing a tremendous amount of damage. That can be kind of a a total shift change, if you will, forgive the pun, in your battle, right? Because he's about to die and boom, he comes back to life and he kills an enemy instead. So instead of him being dead, boom, you have an enemy dead instead. You guys kind of get how it works, right? And furthermore, we're seeing more of Brackus the Shifter now thanks to the Swift Parry artifact set in the game, because a lot of people put Brackus in a Swift Parry. That way he has a 50-50 shot at being unkillable. And then if you do kill him, he's still going to be revived anyway. If you don't kill him, he's going to be unkillable for 1 turn, hopefully get healed up a little bit because he has that healing ability on his A2 and his A1, and then, you still have this passive kind of, in your holster, I guess, right? So you can use that as well. So Brackus the Shifter, I think, is maybe a little bit of a niche champion, but a very effective champion at that. Alright guys, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to go ahead and pick the guy that everybody has last or second to last on their tier list. And I did a whole guide on this dude, Girp the Bloodied, and I gotta say, he is not the best legendary champion in the game. I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that he's OP, he's crazy sleeper, but he's definitely not the worst in my opinion. This is a guy that I've invested in. This is a guy that I was on my Orc 21 Faction Wars 3-star team. This is a guy that I've used before successfully. He has a solid kit. He has a pretty high base attack with pretty decent multipliers as well. He's not hitting like that wet noodle like so many legendary champions are. On his A1, attacks 2 times at random. Each hit has a 50% chance, of placing a decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. So he's getting a 50-50 at 2 shots each hit with a decreased speed on the A1. On the A2, it's an AoE attack. Fills his champion's turn meter by 20% for each enemy under decreased speed debuff. And I think the Unbound Anger is where people get thrown off by this champion. They're like, are you serious, dude? He's not even consistently landing the decreased speed on the A1, and then his A2 is really predicated on having the enemies be under that decreased speed. Obviously, he's better when paired with an enemy who does have that consistent decreased speed, like Tanix Hateflower or a champion like that. However, this Unbound Anger, albeit on a 4-turn cooldown, which has to be noted to be way cooler on a 3-turn, it's crazy, right? Because you still get the turn meter fill by 40%, even if you only do have 2 decreased speeds landed on your enemies, right? But if you put him with a decreased speeder on the same team, and you have it on, like, say, 5 enemies, well, he's immediately going to go again. He's going to have a full turn meter as soon as he's done with his first Unbound Anger. Now, on top of that, Unbound Anger actually hits pretty hard. It's not a weak AoE attack. So it's not amazing, but it's not bad. Now his A3, Lord of War, on a 4-turn cooldown is really great, right? Attacks 1 enemy and then steals their entire turn meter. And this is what helped me beat the red boss using him in Faction Wars. Without him, it would have been much more challenging. But him against, Ice Golem, for example, him against the Spider, for example, him against bosses, the red boss, who you can steal their turn meter, is so powerful to be able to not only completely deplete their turn meter, but also steal. So everything in his kit is moving in the direction of giving him more turns, right? Filling his turn meter faster, ergo getting more A1s off, ergo getting more decreased speed on the enemy team, and then taking more turns, and then leading back to his Lord of War, stealing the turn meter, and kind of going from there. Again, I want to be very clear. He's not the best champion in the game. He's not even top half of legendaries, but I would put him right around there, right? To me, he is a C+, B- legendary, certainly not a big fat F because he deals a lot of damage. At the end of the day, he puts out more damage than almost any other of my Orc champions, and I think his kit has a kind of a nice synergy. Could he use a buff? Sure, but in my opinion, he's not the worst legendary in the game. Alright, so Blood Gorge, guys, is the only champion that I actually don't have built out on today's list, and I wish I did have him. Surprisingly, he is also put at the bottom of a lot of these tier lists that I saw. Blood Gorge is a solid champion who's now crept back into the arena meta, and overall, you can use him in a variety of different places. On his A1, he has a decreased defense for 2 turns at a pretty decent 75% rate for an A1, okay? And that, like I said, that lasts for 2 turns as well on his A1, nice to have. On his Raging Beast, his A2, it's an AoE attack, so attacks all enemies and puts 1 of each target skills on cooldown on a 3-turn cooldown. This is an underrated ability because some enemies, you know, like Valkyrie, for example, only have Bad Alcazar, right? Only has 1 extra ability other than their A1. So it totally negates that and puts it absolutely on cooldown on a 3-turn. Not bad. And then his Decapitate is a very hard-hitting and nasty single target ability. Attacks 1 enemy, will ignore 100% defense, and then enemies killed by this skill cannot be revived. With all the Lydias and the Raglins and the Siphies and the Duchesses and everybody else right now in the game, even Blind Seer is becoming kind of creeping her way into the meta. With all the revival teams out there, it's nice to have the non-revival on a very hard-hitting 100% ignore defense ability from Blood Gorge, a really kind of monster of a single target damage dealer for your team. So next up is another recent fusion or fragment summon. It's Draco the Gaunt. So Draco the Gaunt is another champion that I reviewed in the last 5 legendaries that I maxed out video, guys. And you know what? He's a really strong support champion to have in the game, especially for progression. He's not a slouch. He's a champion definitely worth getting. And I'm surprised to see how low people have ranked him. On the A1, he has a 40% chance of a stun. His damage is based off of HP, which is nice because he has a pretty high base HP at almost 23k. On his A2, increased attack buff and increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. It's on a 3-turn cooldown and also plays a block damage buff for 1 turn on allies with less than 30% HP. This is a really, really nice support ability to have. The increased attack is nice with the increased defense, rare to see both of those abilities together, and then has that block damage, which can be clutch on the enemy, on all allies with less than 30% HP. That's a real nice kind of game changer there to have that block damage on there as well, all on a 3-turn cooldown. Then on his A3, his Runestone Blessing, active effect, plays a shield buff equal to 15% of this champion's max HP on all allies for 3 turns. This is a 4-turn cooldown, excuse me. And then passive, heals each ally by 15% of this champion's max HP whenever a shield placed by him expires, removed, or is broken by an enemy attack. So he has the shield, and then he has the heal. Now, allies whose shield buffs are broken will also counterattack the enemy that breaks the shield. When a shield is broken, the heal occurs instantly before any remaining damage from the shield breaking attack is taken. Well, that's a great ability, guys. Runestone Blessing, and how many octaves did I... That's a great ability, guys! Oh, my word. That's a great ability, guys. Runestone Blessing, I just think... I don't understand how you can look at this champion with a 107 base speed, too. Nice to have that there as well. I don't know how you can look at this champion and say, yeah, he kind of sucks, you know? I think he's like a really, really solid support champion in the game. Increase ally HP in all battles by 25%. Nice to have. Not the best, but nice to have as well. And I just think that if you're looking for a support progression champion, is he a game changer? If you're progression, yeah, he is, right? Like, if that's what you need, if you're, you know, I forgot if he was a fragment or a fusion, but he is a champion that can really help you out, really keep your team alive. And I think we're going to need more champions like this come Doom Tower as well. Alright guys, so last but not least, it's Elegance. So Elegance is another fusion, summon, fragment champion or whatever that was just in the game. And he's a guy that I really like. He's a little bit more niche than, you know, Draco, for example. But still, he has high base stats, 1211 defense, 22k on the HP, high base speed at 106. He's a support champion, and he has a really, really great ability. Let's talk about his whole kit really quickly first. Attacks 1 enemy, has a 35% chance win boot of placing a block cooldown skills debuff for 1 turn. That chance increases by 0.75 for every 1% of HP this champion loses. So essentially, you know, the lower HP he has, the more consistent he will be at totally blocking cooldown skills on an enemy on his Spirits of Spite A1. On his A2, attacks 1 enemy on a 3-turn cooldown. puts the target skills totally on cooldown. If the enemy team has any dupes of that champion, it will put all their skills on cooldown. Very handy to have in faction wars against those Valkyries, those man-eaters, those really trouble champions that you see 2 or 3 of on the same team. Also in the arena, if they have like 2 Hegemons, 2 Rotoses, 2 champions that are popular to have dupes of on your squad, right? And even if they don't have dupes, still nice to have the dead stop, which basically it totally, shuts down an entire champion on the enemy team, right? And then Ghost Rage is a really, really cool ability. On a 4-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance of removing 2 random buffs, okay? Has a 100% chance of decreasing the enemy's turn meter by 20% as well. Now, decreases enemy turn meter by a further 0.2% for every 1% of HP this champion loses. Again, Ghost Rage, and with all his abilities, with these, predicated on how much HP he has or how much HP he's lost, it can be kind of confusing to really, and the fact that he's not removing all buffs, right, can be kind of like, oh, really? That I wish that was all buffs. And true, that's totally true, right? But especially when the meta has a bunch of champions that are laying like 3 or 4 buffs, it'd be nice if that was everything. But to have the 2 buffs out at 100%, his damage is based on HP, which scales pretty well. He's not putting on a ton of damage, though. And also having that turn meter in there makes him a really nice control champion. We talk about control, we also talk about his A2, which, again, takes one enemy entirely out of the battle. And then his A1 kind of does the same thing with block cooldown skills. On his passive, too, it prevents his death and keeps him alive on 1 HP when hit by a fatal hit. If this skill prevents his champion's death, it heals him by 10% of the max HP, fills a turn meter by 20%, and places a shield buff on them equal to 30% of their max HP for 2 turns. Another champion that we're seeing, because of this kind of unique passive, put in a swift parry set as well to make it just very difficult to get rid of, to kill this champion. So a champion who, again, I'm not sitting here telling you he's in the top, 5, 10, 20 legendary champions in the game, but he is a unique champion that can serve some purpose, some value onto your team, especially if you're going after dupes in faction wars, who knows, in Doom Tower or in the arena. So guys, that's going to do it. Let me know, again, which of these legendaries you absolutely hate, or if I left off any legendaries that you guys see people consistently kind of just not giving the love that they deserve. Let me know who it is in the comments below, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, take care, guys.